What's up everyone, it's the Prison Metaler here, and today I'm going to do something different this time. I'm going to do a band album versus another band's album, and today I am going to do Metallica versus Megadeth. What I'm going to do is to one album from Metallica versus one album by Megadeth. So I'm gonna start off with the debut albums it's just for the main examples, and whenever I move along, y'all should get what I mean on this one. So let's start off with their debut albums. Kill 'Em All versus Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. So let's talk about Killing Is My Business. Okay, so unfortunately, this is their debut album. However, I feel like I am not a fan of the band's production. I understand they want to sound very raw and all that, but I just feel like they're I feel like it's been a while since I listened to that album, but I thought the production sounded very rushed, if you know what I mean. I think Dave sounded more on drugs than he was on his future albums, because his reckless behavior back in his days with Metallica, and then starting the early 90s, he began to sober up. So yeah, it sounds like he is definitely on drugs here. Okay, now on to Kill 'Em All. Okay, so as for Kill 'Em All, this is also their thrash album. And yes, Dave Mustaine did wrote almost every song. Well, I don't know if it's true, but I think Dave wrote 4 out of 10 songs, and some people say that Dave wrote almost every song from it. But anywho, this is also a great album from Metallica. And it's a lot of classic songs, like Four Horsemen, Jump in the Fire. But every song on there is perfect. So for what I'm going to choose for these two albums, I am going to say Kill 'Em All. I think so 1 point for Metallica here. I think Kill 'Em All is better than Killing Is My Business, and Business Is Good. So 1 point for Metallica. Okay, so now on to their second albums. Ride the Lightning versus Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? So let's start with Ride the Lightning. This is actually my favorite Metallica album. Without a doubt. This is definitely a very influential thrash metal album. There's nothing else. Every single song on here is perfect. Every song is a 10 out of 10 for Ride the Lightning. What else can I say about this album? It's just nearly perfect. I mean, no, not nearly perfect, just absolutely perfect, 100%. This definitely. Okay, now on to Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? Okay, let me go there. Okay, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? Which is also a thrash metal classic. However, I think one song called I Ain't Superstitious, I think I gave this one an 8 out of 10, but the rest is a 10 out of 10, however. So, yeah, this is also, but I still consider this a classic. without a doubt. Alright, so since only one song from Peace Cells is an 8 out of 10, while the rest is a 10 out of 10, and then Ride the Lightning, I rate every song's 10 out of 10. So I am going with Ride the Lightning. So 2 points for Metallica and 0 for Megadeth so far. Okay, now let's go to their third albums. Master of Puppets versus So Far, So Good, So What. Okay, now let's start with So Far, So Good, So What. This is a great Megadeth album, but I don't think it's one of my favorites by them. And this one, I feel like this album sounded very rushed. But there are some really great songs on there. Like Set the World Afire. My favorite song of the one that's 10 out of 10 for me on this album is Set the World Afire and In My Darkest Hour. But the rest of the songs on there is pretty good too, though. Okay, so now on to Master of Puppets. Now, there are some controversial statements that I'm going to say here about Master of Puppets, but it's nothing negative about it. Now, Master of Puppets is a really great album, but I feel like this album is slightly overrated in my personal opinion. Because average Metallica fan's favorite album by them would be Master of Puppets, but like I said, it's still an amazing album. I just think it's slightly overrated. Not extremely overrated, just slightly overrated. But anyway, this album is definitely a great album. It's also their final album with Cliff Burton. I think as for the song, Megadeth song In My Darkest Hour, this is a solid tribute to Cliff Burton. I think where they had a bus wreck. Metallica had a bus wreck. And, yeah, every song on here is just amazing, without a doubt. So, also, this isn't really a contest on this one. So, I am going to go with Master of Puppets. I think Master of Puppets beats So Far, So Good, So What. So, 3 for Metallica, 0 for Megadeth so far. So let's move on to their fourth album. Injustice for All versus Rust in Peace. So let's talk about Injustice for All. This is their first album without Cliff Burton due to his death from a bus wreck. And this album has a lot of progressive metal elements to it as well, while continuing to feature their thrash metal elements. And there is no bass at all. But, however, it still sounded great. The sound is actually really great, though. And definitely a really real. I think it's very well written. Well written. And there's really nothing else to say. I think this is easily my top 5 favorite Metallica albums. Injustice for All. Definitely an amazing album. Now let's move on to Rust in Peace. Okay, Rust in Peace is my favorite Megadeth album. I just really love the songwriting on this one. The guitar solos, definitely. I think this is the album that got them famous, along with Peace Sells But Who's Buying. But this is definitely a very influential album. Definitely a classic from the 90s. What else can I say? Definitely, this is just perfect. Every song in here is a 10 out of 10 without a doubt. I just really love this album. So, So what I'm going to choose on this one, I'm going with Rust in Peace. So 1 point for Megadeth, finally. On to their mainstream albums. The Black Album versus Countdown to Extinction. So let's start off with Countdown to Extinction. This album features more that has more. They started to become a little softer and radio friendly on this album, but they still continue their thrash metal elements, however. And it's definitely a classic album, however, with such a great songs like Skin on My Teeth, Symphony of Destruction, Architecture of Aggression, Foreclosure of a Dream. Almost every song on there is amazing. So I just have nothing else to say on this one. Okay, now let's go to the Black Album. Okay, so as for the Black Album, this album is a huge sellout. Now, I'm not gonna talk shit to it due to its, it's selling out, because that's really dumb. But I just feel like this is a lot of people consider this the best album ever because of its selling out, which doesn't automatically consider it to be excuse me. That doesn't automatically mean it's the best metal album in general. But, however, then again, I still think it's a pretty great album, but I don't think it's their best. But, even though Enter Sandman is very overplayed a lot, along with Sad But True, but there are some really great songs in there, like Unforgiven, Wherever May Roam, Don't Tread on Me. There's a lot of great songs in there, but if I'm going to have to choose these two albums, I'm going to have to say Countdown to Extinction. I'm not saying anything wrong with the Black Album, but I just have to say Countdown to Extinction, mainly because I just like that album more. Okay, now on to their 6th album, Load versus Euthanasia. Okay, now let's talk about Load. What the hell is their cover album? You want to know what this cover art is? That is piss, blood, and cum. It's not fire. It's full. So, what does that tell you? It's not fire. I mean, what kind of an album cover that has piss, blood, and cum all over it? And, but, anyway, let's talk more about the songs. This album is extremely long, about 78 to 79 minutes, but, however, there are some of the pretty great songs in there, like Ain't My Bitch, 2X4, Till It Sleeps, Key Nothing, Bleeding Me. This has become more of a, like a radio-friendly type album. I just can't take, the only thing I can't take seriously is the title. I'm sorry, not the title, the cover, the album cover. It just really cringes me. I don't call that. Okay, this is what Hetfield explained about it. Lars and Kirk were very into abstract art, pretending they were gay. I knew it bugged me. It was a piss take. That's just stupid. I don't really need to see pictures of piss, blood, or cum. But anyway, let's move on to euthanasia. Honestly, for euthanasia, this is definitely not one of my favorite Megadeth albums. I do think it's a great album, but I just feel like, their other materials are better. This album does not... First album to abandon the thrash metal genre, and it became more like a hard rock / heavy metal type sound. But there is a lot of great songs here, like Reckoning Day, Train of Consequences, A Toilet Monday, Killing Road, title track. Plenty of great songs in there, but then again, this isn't really my favorite album. I'm gonna have to say, Load, because even though I just don't like the artwork on Load, but I just like the songs on there a bit more than I do on Euthanasia. So 1.4. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Load. Okay, next up we got Cryptic Writings versus Reload. You know what? I'll take that back. Since Megadeth started releasing more albums than Metallica does, I'm going to do Cryptic Writings and Risk versus Reload. So let's talk about Cryptic Writings first. I think this is one of their most underrated albums. There's full of underrated songs on there. I feel like this album is a lot better than Euthanasia. Like I said, I don't think Euthanasia is a bad album. I just think their other stuff is better. Full of great songs like Trust, Almost Honest, Use the Man, She Wolf, Sin, FFF. Full of great songs. But is this their best album? No. I just feel like it's a pretty underrated album, in my opinion. And now, let's talk about Risk. Yes, this is Megadeth's worst album. It has more like pop rock sound than metal or hard rock. I only like 2 songs from this album. It's Prince of Darkness and The Doctor Is Calling. Those were the only 2 songs that are decent. The rest just bores me to death. It's like pop rock. So, I'm just not going to talk more about this album. Okay, now let's talk about Reload. I think Reload is slightly better than Load, in my personal opinion. Even though it's still a very long album, and the artwork that I mentioned earlier, it's not as disgusting, but I just feel like there's better songs on this album than it was on Load. But then again, it's just, I think I don't know if it was meant to be like a double album back then or so, but nah. I just think this album is better than their previous album, Load. So, this is honestly a tie on this one. I think Reload beats Risk without a doubt, but I think Cryptic Writings beats Reload. So, it's a tie for another point for Megadeth and Metallica. Okay, so yeah. So 1 point for each band. Here, alright, so now on to The World Needs a Hero and The System Has Failed versus Saint Anger. Alright, so this one is not a contest at all. But let's go into details. Let's first talk about The World Needs a Hero. Alright, so originally this was the band's final album because I think Dave had an injury with his arm that prevented him from playing his guitar permanently, which forced him to disband the band. But unfortunately, 3 years later, they come back with another album called The System Has Failed. But let's talk about that album later. So now let's focus on The World Needs a Hero. Alright, so yes, this album is a lot better than Risk, but I think this is one of Megadeth's weakest albums, in my opinion. Probably my second least to third least favorite, but I do feel like this album could be better if it has better production or sound quality. But the songwriting is good, however. However, there are some pretty underrated songs like Disconnect, title track, 1000 Times Goodbye, Promises, and all that. But then again, I think this is one of their weakest albums. Now on to The System Has Failed. Now this is definitely a best Return to Roots album. Not their best album, but I think it's their best album in a long time, if you know what I mean. But I think this is one of their most underrated. I think this is, if not their most underrated album. Just shit tons of great songs. Blackmail the Universe, Die Dead Enough, Scorpion, Back in the Day, Tears in the Vial. This album is so underrated. I just really like this album. But yeah, it's definitely a great comeback album. And now let's talk about Saint Anger. Now we all know this is Metallica's worst album, not including Lulu. No. That album was terrible, but no, we're not talking about Lulu. And spoiler, I am excluding Lulu on here, just so y'all know. So yeah, this album tries to get more into a new metal sound with, and this is their first album without Jason Newsted, which is replaced by, Robert last name. I can't even say his last name right. I think he was a bass player for Exodus, a thrash metal band. But or he was the original one, the original bass player for Exodus. But anyways, I feel like this album could do better if there wasn't. The only thing that bothers me with this album is the snare drums, and I'm pretty sure that's what most people would say. Yeah, I just do not like this album. Yes, I think this is their worst album. I don't know. Every song is just, it's too long. I mean, okay, Some Kind of Monster was a decent song, but still. Ugh. I'm never listening to this album again. This is terrible. So, this is, again, not a contest. World Meets a Hero and The System Has Failed definitely beat Saint Anger, without a doubt. Even Risk is better than Saint Anger. Okay, now on to Death Magnetic versus United Abominations, Endgame, and 13. Now let's start with Death Magnetic since I'm already there. This is the album's return to their thrash metal roots since Injustice for All. Now, this album is not their best, but I feel like this is better than their last couple of albums. And this is the only album in the 21st Century by Metallica that I actually like a lot. I do think this is a great album, but I don't think it's their best. Great songs like Broken, Beat, Scarred, That Was Just Your Life, All Nightmare Long, Cyanide, The Unforgiven Part 3, Judas Kiss, and My Apocalypse. Yeah, I think this is a pretty great album. But I don't think it's their, like I said, I don't think it's their best. So, now let's move on to United Abominations. Now let me get there first. Just hold on. It's not going to take long, I promise. Sorry guys, I'm still... Oh, there we go. United Abomination. I'm just on the Wikipedia page to help me remember all of the songs. Okay, now I'm there now. Alright, so I do think this is a great album, but I don't think it's not one of my favorite albums by them. But I do think this is a great album. I am planning on doing a album rank on Megadeth soon, but we're not talking about album ranks. We're talking about the competition between Metallica and Megadeth albums. So, yeah, there's some pretty great tracks like Sleepwalker, Washington Is Next, the title track, Gears of War, the remake track, A Totlit Monday, and Burnt Ice. I thought this is a pretty great album. Excuse me, allergies. Now let's talk about Endgame. This is actually one of my favorite Megadeth albums. I thought this album was amazing. Definitely the songwriting. This feels like a sequel to Rust in Peace for some reason. Not lyrically, but instrumentally. I think every song on there is amazing. So I just don't have any much words to say about this one. And it's been a while, but I really do like this album a lot. So let's go ahead and move to 13. Now, 13, I do think it's a great album, but this album is one of my least favorites from Megadeth. I do think it's a great album, but I just feel like their other materials are better. Even though I do like plenty of songs on there, like Sudden Death, Public Enemy #1, Guns, Drugs, and Money, New World Order, Black Swan, excuse me, and the title track. Now, which album won? I think United Abominations and Endgame beats Death Magnetic, but I think Magnetic beats 13. So 2 for Megadeth, 1 for Metallica. Okay, now Super Collider and Dystopia versus Hardwired to Self-Destruct. So let's talk about Super Collider. I feel like this album is way overhated for some reason. I just feel like I don't think this album is that bad at all. No, it's not one of their best. It's still one of my least favorites, but I just don't see the hate for this album. It's because it got back to their radio roots, like their 90s era. But I just don't see the hate for this album. I just thought it's very overhated. But then again, it's not my favorite. So I'm just going to move on to Dystopia, which I really like this album a lot. Yes, it's a lot better than Super Collider, and I was pretty hyped for this album. This is one of my favorite metal albums of 2016. It's got Chris Adler, who is no longer in Lamb of God. He was the drummer for Lamb of God, but not anymore. So, but I just really think this album is amazing. This is their latest album as well. So let's talk about the fair tracks. The Threat is Real, title track, Fatal Illusion, Bullet to the Brain, Post-American World, Poisonous Shadows, and The Emperor. I just thought this is a fantastic album, in my opinion. I just don't know any more words to say here. So, I'm going to move on to Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Honestly, now let's talk about Hardwired to Self-Destruct. I'm honestly not a fan of this album. Do I think it's a bad album? No. Yes, this album does continue this is the band's first album in 8 years, and this feels like there's B-side tracks from Death Magnetic for some reason. I don't know why, but it's just me though. I just don't really care for the album that much, to be honest. But even though I do like Moth into Flame a lot, but I'm just not feeling this album for some reason. I mean, I just don't know any much words to say there. I'm just not feeling it. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it's just my personal opinion. So, however, the winner, okay, Dystopia definitely beats Hardwired, but I think Hardwired beats Super Collider. So, 1 point for Megadeth and 1 point for Metallica. So, I didn't count who won, so what I'm going to do is whenever I edit the video, I am going to count down who won. And who has the most points wins. So, until next time, I'll see y'all later. Peace out.